I represent the 16th district in Illinois, and just a little background on my district. My district, I don't think anybody from Caterpillar is here, but I have the largest concentration of Caterpillar workers anywhere in the world. About 11,000 Caterpillar workers in the Peoria area. We make a lot of D10 tractors, excavators, mining equipment that goes all over the world. People are surprised to learn that Caterpillar has 29 manufacturing plants in China, right? 4 R&D facilities in China. And so I'll talk a little bit more about this as we talk about the Select Committee on China, but in my own district, which is a fairly rural district and heavy on manufacturing, heavy on agriculture, we're directly tied to China in many ways. I also have a very large agricultural district. It was the 8th largest ag district in the country in terms of corn and soybean production. About a third of those crops go to China every year. A lot of ethanol, a lot of corn, a lot of soybeans, a lot of DDGs that go to China also. My district also has the distinction 94% of the world's pumpkins come from my district. So next time you're having a pumpkin latte or a pumpkin pie or a pumpkin anything, most likely it originated in central Illinois. The growing climate for pumpkins is very good there. Pierce mentioned, or maybe Jim mentioned, the land of Lincoln. My old district we just had redistricting. I have a new district now, the 16th. It was Abraham Lincoln's old congressional district. We have now lost some of that territory, but I gained the birthplace of Ronald Reagan and I represent Dixon, Illinois. Of course, Reagan was the only president born in Illinois, and so we're proud to represent Dixon, his boyhood home, Eureka College, where he graduated from. So a lot of history being a Republican, having both Lincoln and Reagan in our district. As Pierce mentioned in the bio, I thoroughly enjoy serving on the committees that I've been fortunate to be placed on. Ways and Means Committee, I tell people I learn every day on the Ways and Means Committee, something new, something different, whether it's trade related, whether it's tax related, whether it's healthcare related, and all things in between on Ways and Means. I currently serve as the chair of the new Work and Welfare Committee. We're going to have our first hearing next week on that. The subcommittee on work and welfare. I also serve on the trade subcommittee, which plays an important role back home in my district related to agriculture, Caterpillar. I should also mention John Deere's headquarters is about 2 miles from outside of my district, so having Deere and Cat is important for the manufacturing base in my district. I also serve on the House Intelligence Committee and have been placed on that for the last 2 years, and of course the new Select Committee on China. It's interesting, when I first got to Congress, I became the co-chair of the U.S.-China Working Group along with Congressman Rick Larson. Rick and I have appeared before Ripon before, kind of in a dual role, talking about our work on that. The interesting part about that, I think, is the U.S.-China Working Group has been more of an organization to have engagement with China. And back when I started that in 2016, and I'm still a part of it, things have transformed and changed much differently. And part of that has serving on the Intelligence Committee over the last 2 years has kind of opened my eyes a little bit more on the adversarial approach that China takes in the Indo-Pacific region and across the globe. And so obviously our relationship with China, I think, has significantly changed. People ask when that happened. I think in the last 3 or 4 years here, COVID accentuated that, but it's a much different relationship today. And going back to the creation of the Select Committee on China, I give Speaker McCarthy a lot of credit for creating this the first week that we had our new majority. Frankly, I wish it would have happened, there was some talk that would happen 2 years ago with Speaker Pelosi. Of course, it didn't happen. And if you look at the vote on the House floor to create the Select Committee on China, over 100 Democrats supported it, which is a positive thing. Secondly, if you look at the members that have populated the Select Committee on China, I don't think we could ask for better members in the House on both sides. Substantive members, very smart members, conscientious, that bring a lot to the table, both on our side and the Democrat side. Chairman Gallagher, I think, does an excellent job leading the committee so far. He's articulate. He knows the subject matter very well. I think he's been very inclusive on the committee and taking in all views on both sides of the aisle. Same with Ranking Member Raja Krishnamurthy. Raja and I, obviously, both from the same state, we know each other well, and I think it was an excellent pick by Leader Jeffries on there. So I think the framework has been set, and I would say that the thing that the CCP fears the most, the Communist Chinese Party, is bipartisan support against China. And I think we have a real opportunity on the Select Committee to be engaged on a number of these issues. So I think everybody wonders, so, you know, committee's been created, what is going to be 2 years from now, what is going to be the policy initiatives, what are going to be maybe a new law or proposals that come out that are going to be different. And I think we've obviously set the stage for a lot of that. We had our first hearing a month ago. We're going to have our second hearing tonight in prime time. It's a little different. We're doing it, again, 7 to 9:30 tonight. Tonight will be focused on Xinjiang and the persecution of the Uyghurs and the concentration camps and education camps, so it'll be interesting. Our first one, I thought, went very well. We had General McMaster there. We had Matt Pottinger there. We had a number of other witnesses that I think were very, very strong. And so I think it set a very, very good tone moving forward. What we're going to try to do is once a month have a hearing like this and do that for obviously the next 10 months of this year and going into next year. A lot of that will focus on different areas: technology, trade, economics, the Indo-Pacific region, and a number of other topics to focus on. What Chairman Gallagher has kind of asked me to at least be active in and come up with some policy proposals on is obviously being on the Ways and Means Committee is trade. And I'll just mention a few things on that. You know, going way back when I first got elected to Congress, I was a supporter in general of the framework for the TPP. And I didn't think it was perfect. By all means, there are many things that I could change, but creating the framework in the Indo-Pacific region to isolate China, to write the rules of the road when it comes to trade and economics, I thought was very, very important to do. In the current geopolitics of the Indo-Pacific region, our allies are really craving our leadership there. Anytime you talk to folks from Japan or South Korea or Australia, the Philippines, Indonesia, smaller countries, Vietnam, they're looking for the U.S. for leadership there. So what does that mean? I'm not under the illusion that we're going to create another TPP like that, but I think we have to think about what we're going to do from an economic standpoint to build relationships. Whether those are bilateral trade relationships, there's a lot of talk about doing a bilateral with Taiwan. I think we're going to have a lengthy discussion on our subcommittee about that, on whether we start with a bilateral trade agreement with Taiwan. That will be a big topic of what we do. But more importantly, how do we set the rules of the road for trade in the Indo-Pacific region with our like-minded allies? We need to be engaged on that. I've been very critical of the administration over the last 2 years. Tomorrow, at the Ways and Means Committee, we're going to have Ambassador Tai there to talk about the trade agenda or the lack of the trade agenda. Many of you are aware of IPEF, which is, of course, the administration's proposal for the Indo-Pacific region. I understand the framework of it, but I don't think it addresses market access. I don't think there's any enforcement mechanisms there. It has really no teeth. It's really just a framework. And again, talking to our like-minded allies in the region, I think they're very, very, very frustrated with that also. The other thing that I will acknowledge, and I mentioned this in the first hearing we had, how the relationship with China has changed and become much more adversarial, which is unfortunate. There's less of an engagement attitude from China. Well, what's the genesis of that? I mean, China has done no favors, in my view, in terms of engagement with the U.S. or the West. A lot of it goes back to, just in the last year here, what's happened in Ukraine. Of course, Xi Jinping spent 2 days kind of in a love fest in Moscow this week with Putin, right? Talking about continuing to work together, an unbreakable bond. I think many have been very perplexed and disappointed with China and what the role they've taken in supporting Putin. They have not gone the step next with lethal aid to Putin, but obviously we're watching closely to see what happens with that. I would also mentioned the wolf warrior mentality that diplomacy from China has had. If you look at their, some of you may have been around the last ambassador to the U.S., who's now the foreign minister, but very much a wolf warrior mentality towards the United States. And at the time when we needed diplomacy the most, they sent someone that never had been an ambassador anywhere before and really took that attitude, a very adversarial approach. His first meeting he had on Capitol Hill was with Congressman Larson and I as part of the working group. And he lectured us on how if Abraham Lincoln was alive today, he would think China's form of government was much more democratic than the United States. That was his first entree, and Congressman Larson and I just sat there perplexed. And he sort of continued on, and now he's been promoted as the foreign minister. And I only mention that because that's kind of been the entree when it comes to their diplomacy. Other things, in the relationship, obviously fentanyl continues to be a huge issue in this country. Every opportunity we talk to the Chinese about the precursors that get produced in China, go to Mexico and come across our border. Hasn't been much done there in terms of their efforts there. And their provocative natures in the South China Sea and with Taiwan continue on a daily basis. What's, I think, ironic, and going back to just Ukraine for a second, if you look at what China has been focused on for the last 20 years, sovereignty is so much a part of China. Sovereignty for Tibet, sovereignty for Xinjiang, sovereignty for Hong Kong, sovereignty for Taiwan. But in Ukraine, you have an independent, sovereign country that was invaded illegally and unprovoked. And by the way, China had a lot of economic relationships with Ukraine at the time. And this invasion happens, and they side with Putin. So it's very much, I think, a double standard and a lot of hypocrisy that China supports Putin on the invasion of a sovereign country, but yet China, that's all they talk about is sovereignty for their own country. So, I actually, in a meeting with Blinken we had about a month ago on the Senate side, I raised this issue. It was right before he was supposed to have his meeting there, and he agreed wholeheartedly. But I just don't think that's been raised enough on just the hypocrisy of that. Obviously, the balloon incident, I think, highlighted just for the American people the frustration, I think, with China, too. No one could understand why China's flying this balloon over some of our most important military sites and assets across the United States. And the explanation was it was a weather balloon, right? Which clearly was not, in fact, true on this. And so, again, all of these things, I think, have had a cascading effect in terms of the relationship with China. Some of you may have seen polling done in the last couple of weeks here that, the American public support for China is at an all-time low here. Now, I mention all that, but I go back to the economic relationship in my own district with China. A lot of my colleagues want to go to a Cold War mentality with China, right? That's kind of the default is, Cold War mentality, we need to decouple. But the reality is the economic relationship with China is much different than the Cold War 40 years ago. We really didn't have an economic relationship with Russia like we do today. Name a sector of our economy and we are intertwined with China, right? I mentioned Caterpillar, I mentioned agriculture, financial services. Some of the biggest investors in China right now, and they keep pouring money, is the Goldman Sachs of the world, right? The JP Morgans of the world, BlackRock. I mean, they're pouring money into China left and right. And so that economic relationship, so how do you intertwine that? I think that's the balance that the Select Committee will be one of the most difficult ones for us to do. I don't pretend, we have some very smart, capable people on the Select Committee that deal with military, national security, and some of those issues. And I think that's an important conversation. I don't know if anybody saw the 60 Minutes piece this last week. It was very good. Chairman Gallagher was on there, but they talked about the U.S. Navy and what we need to do to compete with China in the Indo-Pacific region. So I think the Select Committee will have a strong, obviously, we'll have a strong platform and narrative as it relates to those issues. But I think on the economic side is really going to be the one where we, again, if we put proposals in place, I think we can help to isolate China economically. Again, there's an opportunity to do that, but it's really going to take a bipartisan effort to put this forward. but I think there's real opportunity. And I've had a number of conversations with the Democrats on the other side that are really interested in doing this. So how that comes together, yet to be determined, but I think we have some very good ideas and good proposals on what we can do on the economic side as it relates to China. So I've talked about a lot there. I know you guys have a lot of questions and comments, so happy to open it up for anything that you guys want to ask or talk about.
Great. Thank you, Darin.
Thank you.